are kicking it off with our academic keynote. Shannon, which is I absolutely love. Hello, she's waving right here. And I will tell you a little bit about Shannon O'Brien. I don't know. She specialized in American politics, focusing on the American presidency and political development. So, oh my, you're going to get right. Yes. Let's start Saturday with flames. I love this. She's published 2 books, Why Presidential Speech Locations Matter, Analyzing Speech Making from Truman to Obama and Donald Trump and the Kayfabe Presidency, Professional Wrestling Rhetoric in the White House. Her book, Eugenics in American Political Life, How the Politics of Superiority still shape us today, was just published and looks at the foundations of American eugenics and how they are still around today in American politics. A lot of people don't know that. So Dr. O'Brien's research generally focuses on the impact of individuals upon these choices and institutions and institutional development, all of these social structures and systems that we can't control that are all around us. That's her jam. So presidential speeches have been her primary focus, but much of that is driven by how a president's choices, words, policies, etc., how they impact our lives. And she's been featured in everything that matters. And so with that, I am so excited to introduce Shannon. How are you?
I'm okay. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Where
yeah.
are you located again?
I live in Austin, Texas.
Okay. Go Longhorn. Keep Austin weird. I love it.
Yeah, that's where the job is. So
Yeah, I like it. I
and
did.
Joe Rogan apparently too. So yeah.
Oh, really?
I think yeah, I live downtown. His comedy mothership is around the corner from where I live.
Mothership.
Yeah. So
Oh,
yeah, that's what it's called.
of course it is. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop.
Anyway,
So,
yeah, no, and my next book, the one I'm working on right now, is all about phrenology.
yeah. Oh, we're talking. Yes. So, for folks that are gonna be listening in, Shannon, I will share or allow you to share your screen in case you want to.
No, I'll just talk
No?
straight. It's cool. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I thought about it, but like really it was just like a cover page that just said like this is the title of what I'm talking about with me. So
I love it. Great. So then folks, if you want to, use the chat, put in questions, comments, please do so. And then at the end, yeah, we'll certainly allow some time for Q&A if you're up for it.
oh yeah, in fairness, I mean, I write
Even if you
short.
want to do however you want to format
No,
it.
no, I write short. So just to let you know, it's gonna clock. This keynote's probably gonna clock in about half an hour.
Sweet.
So
Okay.
I don't think I could write an hour.
I feel you. You're like, wait, what? Everybody? I know.
So
Great. Well, I'll shut up and
it's
yeah, I'll let you kick it off.
But yeah, no, I'm Shannon B. O'Brien. I'm an associate professor of instruction in the government department at the University of Texas at Austin. And I like she said, wonderful introduction. I work on presidents primarily, but at the end of the day, behind everything I do, I'm interested in how individuals impact systems. That's kind of what I do. And also, just to let you know, I'm because I have the speech in front of me, I'm actually hiding myself because I do have a nasty habit of watching myself during the talk. So if somebody puts something in the chat, just feel free to just cut in if you want to mention it or something. It's cool. I'm fine. I'm totally fine with that. But anyway, let me get going. My keynote, what I titled it was The Performative Presidency, Donald Trump and the Politics of Wrestling. So, thanks for the introduction. Um, to be really honest, when I sat down to prepare this talk, I changed my mind about a dozen times about what I wanted to say. Because probably like all of you, and as somebody who studies president, it's changing week to week right now. It's changing a lot pretty quick. And so I'd sit down and I'd write something and change something else. But the more I thought about it, the more I kept coming back to the same conclusion, which like this conference, this space where professional wrestling is taken seriously, I sincerely mean this is becoming more important than ever. Because wrestling's not just a spectacle, it's theater, it's athleticism, it's business, it's storytelling, it's communication, it's identity, it's performance, it's global, it's local, it's mythic, it's intimate, and most importantly, it's real. And I don't mean that in the way that gets you into internet fights over whether there's like chair shots actually hurt or something. I don't mean it like that. I mean it real in the way that culture's real in the way that people believe in what they watch, especially how they connect with it and how they build their worldview through it. So, what I was thinking about when I was working on this is like, what is wrestling really? You know, beneath the lights and the athleticism, there's something really ancient inside of it. And it's something really powerful. Inside wrestling is storytelling, pure primal storytelling. And it hasn't stayed static. It's evolved in this rich, complex tapestry that weaves these narratives that don't just entertain, they hook people. And they forge these really deep emotional bonds because we know characters. We've walked in their journeys. They become almost like family members. Now, sometimes they're the family members you only want to see at the holidays, but they still matter to people and they still matter to us. And we care about their journeys. The magic here, though, I think also lies in the universality of the themes: betrayal, love, ambition, conflict, anger. These are fundamental experiences of being human. And that's why I think wrestling resonates. And that's why I think it's so relatable. And I think precisely that shared relatability, that collective emotional journey, that's what transforms an audience into a community. Now, I'm not a wrestling scholar. I mean, yeah, I wrote a book on professional wrestling. I'm going to get into how I got there is part of what this speech is about. But I'm a political scientist at the end of the day. I study. I'm a presidency nerd. I got a TikTok called Presidency Nerd, for crying out loud. I that's what I do. Uh, I don't remember a time though when presidency wasn't part of my life. And I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. I grew up in the burbiest burbs in Louisville, Kentucky. And that is not the epicenter of American politics. I hope you realize that. It's really not. But politics had this weird way of getting into my childhood. My next door neighbor's dad, my next door neighbor's my best friend growing up. His dad reminded me, or rather, the the Disney movie reminded me of him, maybe, of Bob Parr in The Incredibles. You know, he has this boring 9 to 5 insurance job, and he's wearing, khakis and nothing flashy, but he's secretly Mr. Incredible. My next door neighbor, my best friend's dad was a retired Secret Service agent. And then also, the guy who was supposed to be the best man at my parents' wedding was also a Secret Service agent, my dad's best friend. But he had job things. So I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, thinking protecting presidents is a regular job, like accounting or orthodontics. Uh, and it just wasn't, I didn't realize how exceptional that was as a kid. It was just like, oh yeah, yeah. My neighbor worked for Eisenhower, and I got a few stories about that, which he didn't tell me. But the walls are thin at the house, uh, and I was young. But anyway, uh, this planted a seed and in a fascination. Eventually, this became a career. So why am I bringing that up at a wrestling conference? Well, it's because I'm interested in how individuals shape institutions, how people, with all their quirks and all their contradictions, and how every president's a little different, how they leave fingerprints on systems much, much bigger than themselves. So, how did I get from American presidency to professional wrestling? Well, actually, in kind of a roundabout way, I have to go to Europe for that. When I did my master's degree at University of Louisville, and I was wrapping up, there was like, what am I going to do with my life? I was working actually at a travel agency doing visas, and they were paying my tuition. You can buy a human; it's possible. And that was the '90s, and I was going through, and it was great. I didn't know what I was going to do, and a friend of mine threw me a lifeline. She told me if I could get over there, she'd get me a teaching job. Got a really interesting curveball. So now I'm in my 20s. I'm in a city where I don't speak the language at all. And was it fun? Yeah. Was it isolating? Yeah. But you know what was on Friday nights? In this culture, in this middle of Budapest, Hungary, WCW wrestling. And because this is, by the way, in case you're curious, this is 1998. And it's in English. And it's not just in English, it's in Southern English. And you can tell I have a slight Southern accent. I'm from Kentucky. Uh, like I said, British English was what they spoke. That was the lingua over there. And you get tired sometimes of not hearing your people. And so this sounded like home. And and this was what I started doing. I started watching this and I started absorbing the language and the patterns and the drama. And this was my weekly ritual. And then I discovered that WWF was on RTL Spy, that's the German station. And and that was on afterwards. And so I watched a lot of wrestling that year. And that became part of my entertainment and part of my life. Became a big part of my life because I still don't speak Hungarian. And I know words, but let's just say or Hungarian grammar is an animal unto itself. And my brain doesn't work that way, real. I came home. I did that for a year, and I came home and started a PhD program at the University of Florida in political science. You get into that, I won't get into that, but mostly it's just I realized I missed school. And so I miss talking to people about like ideas and stuff. So that's what I want to do. And at that point, wrestling started fading into the background. And my focus completely shifted. And I really dove into like American presidency and specifically the wheres. Like that's what that first book's about ultimately. And it became a dissertation in the book is if president can speak anywhere, well, why here? Why there? What's location tell us about? Because a lot of people study speeches, but not a lot of people actually really bother to look at locations. I mean, if you got a president, you can turn a mic on that guy. He'll speak in a men's bathroom and get the entire national press corps. So why is he going certain places? And why does that matter? And that became the book. And wrestling felt like this closed chapter, just this thing that I did in the past, and that's it. And then Donald Trump in 2015. And you ever got that feeling where you get that like that nudge in the back of your brain and like your brain's like going, knocking on you sort of and going, hello, I'm here. And so I'm watching the campaigning, going on for the primaries. And I'm like, this feels familiar. It's wrestling. Oh, yeah, it's wrestling. And that's what happened to me. His delivery, his style was familiar, and then it clicked. Budapest, Friday nights, WCW. He's using the playbook. He's using the mannerisms. He's using the language. He's using the performance. And it's straight out of that wrestling world that I had immersed myself in. And this just wasn't politics. This is political theater that's borrowing heavily from wrestling. And that's what I sparked my second book, which is Donald Trump and Kayfabe Presidency. I wanted to unpack precisely how wrestling tactics were being deployed in a presidential campaign and a presidency, and crucially, why that fusion of entertainment and politics struck such a chord, and what does it tell us about communication and power today? Because Donald Trump does not grow out of the typical political soil of politicians. He didn't spend decades climbing the ladder of public service. He didn't go from local office to national office. Hey, he didn't even have a dog in the White House. Though he's got plenty of bones to pick with people. I mean, technically, for us over in political science land, he's no longer. But when he was first running, we have to usually unpack the term. He's what we call a political amateur, because the amateur is just somebody who's never actually had any other office before. So he's an amateur running at this. That doesn't mean he didn't know what he was. It just means he just never run for office. So Donald Trump comes from the business, real estate, and reality television and professional wrestling. His Atlantic City hotel had hosted WrestleMania in '88, and he just didn't show up. He embraced it. For all accounts that I've read, he kind of sat there just like goggle-eyed and brought it back the next year. And I don't think wrestling ever left him. He forged these really strong, lasting relationships with people who shape wrestling entertainment. I mean, our Secretary of Education, for example, now. And in fact, To understand Donald Trump, the candidate, the president, the political force, I think you have to understand professional wrestling. And that's why I called this the performative presidency of Donald Trump. And I get it, or at least I don't. I do. When I started talking about this at conferences and trying to use this idea of wrestling to explain Trump at academic conferences, people looked at me like I was dropped on my head. Uh, they, you get, that look you get when people are like, "That's nice, you poor child," uh, because entertainment, especially wrestling, is often considered lowbrow. It's considered beneath serious political thought. And I know, I got the looks. I know, I got the looks. Uh, but I really thought there was something there, and I feel so vindicated. Like, now I feel so vindicated. Uh, but here's the thing, okay? Many political scientists are out there looking for answers in legislation, in polling data, in party structure, in this big theory that we've done. And it doesn't work real well with Trump. Trump's out there cutting promos. He's living this big kayfabe-ish life. He's winning crowds over, knowing exactly what he's doing, and people love him for it. And academics are being left behind. And when you have a political figure like Trump that taps into that cultural vein and captures the zeitgeist, traditional analysis looks hopelessly out of touch. Or, and I had to look this up, as Gen Alphas might put it, totally cringe, big snooze fest. And yeah, I had to run that through a translator because, yeah, I don't do, yeah, I'm definitely a Gen Xer. But wrestling fans have always known how this game works. They know it's scripted. They know they're not duped. They're in on the show. And in wrestling terms, they're usually referred to as smart marks. Fans who know the rules but still choose to emotionally invest in the drama. But Trump supporters, they're political smart marks. It's a little different, but I think they are. They know what the performance is. They know he's playing a character. But he also knows that he sees them. And he gives them a storyline where they win. That's what I think a lot of people miss about Trump supporters. He provides a storyline where they're the winners. He travels to parts of the country that feel ignored and overlooked, and he tells those crowds, you matter, you are the real America. And more than that, he makes them the protagonists in a battle against corrupt elites, fake news, deep states, and coastal snobs. Is it surprising that a population that's comfortable giving intense loyalty to dynamic characters in an arena might transfer that loyalty to a political figure who promises visibility and champions their cause? This is the oldest story in wrestling, which is the underdog against a villainous system. And this is where I think it gets deeper. Trump doesn't just use wrestling as a metaphor. He lives the logic, the rhythms of the rhetoric, the way he creates feuds, the nicknames, the catchphrases, and the refusal to ever apologize. This is straight out of the squared circle. In wrestling, apologizing kills your momentum and it makes you look weak. Now, think about Trump. From the Central Park Five decades ago to countless controversies ever since, has he ever truly, sincerely, and humbly apologized about anything? No. He said sorry a couple times on a few things, but no, he doesn't really ever apologize. Instead, he demands apologies from others. This is about projecting unwavering strength even when wrong. And in wrestling, the worst thing that can happen, in my opinion, is not getting booed. It's getting no reaction. And I think that's Trump. And I think this is where a lot of academics miss this. Irrelevance is his greatest fear. He doesn't mind being the villain. In fact, I actually think he prefers being the villain because when people boo him, they're still watching, they're still reacting, they're still in the arena. And I'd argue they're still in his arena. And in politics, as in wrestling, he's he. And this is crucial. Wrestlers live for a reaction. They live for cheers. They live for boos. They live for any strong emotion. The worst fate you can get is silence and indifference. Trump thrives on reaction. Traditional politicians avoid criticism, and Trump feeds on it. Negative attention is still attention. It proves his relevance. And I really think, and I strongly believe this, he enjoys engaging his opponents more than his allies because they provide conflict and they provide energy. I mean, when he, and he goes to like West Virginia a lot and he goes to a lot of these places. I mean, these are, he's just getting really like adulation. It's like, I love you more. No, I love you more. Or tell me how you love me more. He likes the conflict. Now, if you spend any time watching him, Trump thrives off of that conflict. He needs a foil. He needs somebody to bounce off of, somebody to mock, somebody to belittle, somebody to challenge. Now, sometimes that's Hillary Clinton, sometimes it's Joe Biden, and sometimes it's literally anybody who gives him oxygen. But that's because every great wrestling storyline needs a hero and villain. You need a face, you need a heel, usually. Trump needs an enemy. He kept Hillary Clinton as the boogeyman in his speeches long after she left the political stage. He relentlessly painted opponents like Joe Biden as existential threats. Well, why? Because a strong antagonist made him look more and more like a beleaguered hero fighting against the odds, which is a classic wrestling trope. So let's be honest. I think Trump seems most comfortable being the antagonist, the heel. He leans into criticism. He plays up stereotypes his detractors assign him. But here's the genius of this. And this is what I think is really cool. From a performance perspective, when he does make a slight face turn or he acts more presidential even for a moment, he throws everybody off balance and he gets huge attention, which may have been actually the goal all along. When he was doing when the debates, whenever the bar was set so low, and I remember back in his first run, when he appeared presidential, praise was just heaped on him and heaped on him. And maybe that's the goal. And it keeps things off balance. And I also think that's a goal. But let me dive into some of the more compelling performances, his communication style, especially during his rallies and speeches. Whenever you watch or you see a Trump speech, we frequently get bombarded with fact checks, right? Mountains of evidence pointing out all these inaccuracies, the things that he's saying that aren't accurate. But the natural question then should be, why doesn't that stick? Why doesn't that fundamentally alter the dynamic? With a traditional politician, if they are hit with as many inaccuracies as he is, they immediately go in the defensive mode. Well, for Trump, in my opinion, factual presentation takes a backseat to something far more powerful, which is the presentation, the showmanship, and the emotion. I mean, you think about it. Could he deliver a dry, fact-laden speech? Absolutely, he could. But would that ignite a crowd? No. Would that dominate a news cycle? No. What we witness in his rallies isn't a debate club. It's political theater. He taps into feeling and energy, and he's a salesman. He's pitching a product with relentless passion, and that product is Donald Trump. Accuracy is secondary to the connection and the story that he's weaving. And I think this is the brilliance in this. What he does is he turns traditional weaknesses into strength. Every correction, every fact check becomes ammunition. Well, how? The media's focus keeps him in the spotlight. That's free publicity. And his base, those corrections aren't seen as legitimate critiques. They're attacks by the hostile establishment, which galvanize support and deepen loyalty. What I think he's done with the inaccuracies, and it's actually somewhat sophisticated. He's engineered a feedback loop where criticism reinforces his position. He's put himself in a win-win. And the masterstroke here might actually be language and the way he uses language. It's subtle and it's powerful, and he's redefined key terms. Take the term fake news. For most of us, fake means untrue. That's simple. But when Trump uses it, it carries a different weight. He doesn't use it to mean untrue. It's not about being false. It's more about being, I dislike this. The narrative is inconvenient, By labeling something as fake, he's giving his supporters permission to ignore it, dismiss the veracity without even having to disprove it. It's not a statement of fact, it's a statement of preference. And that's a powerful tool to control a narrative. It's fascinating, maybe unsettling, but language becomes a key player in the political arena. And this is why I think this is important here. And this is actually probably my favorite line when I wrote this. He's not just performing politics, he's turned politics into a wrestling match. He's turned the political arena into wrestling. It's just most traditional politicians don't realize they're playing that game. But he is. Now, politics isn't wrestling. The stakes are different. The consequences are real. The international stage does not always buy our performance. When Trump used tariffs and trade deals like chairs in a no DQ match, I believe he's underestimated how different the rules are when you're not the one writing the script. The carefully constructed narratives, the controlled environment of a ring, that doesn't map perfectly onto complex international relations. Countries have long memories, they have different rules, and they're not playing characters. Trump's approach, treating alliances like temporary storylines and using tariffs like props sometimes to create leverage, trying to act like an outsider immune to established rules. I think this is like playing with unstable dynamite. In the wrestling ring, where I think he's comfortable, the outcome is predetermined, usually. But in global politics, explosions can be real, and they can be very damaging, and they're unpredictable. Go back to the speech stuff. The power of wrestling here lies in connection, that gut level bond between the wrestling and the performer. Donald Trump hasn't just borrowed wrestling style, he's tapped into relational power, building an incredibly dedicated following that feels a deep personal connection to him. You know, if you look on the news, everybody talks about what's going to happen next because everything's about the relationship with Trump. Well, it's because he has forged that connection to him, not party. But there's a tension inherent in this model when you apply to governing. The show relies on a performer to stay on the stage, bathing in the adoration of the crowd. Yet the lives of that crowd unfold far away from the stage lights. Grand promises, defiant stances, theme music, all the excitement of the stage resonates powerfully when you're in that shared space of the rally. It's fun. People get to emote and react. But what happens when the cheers fade and the reality of economics and policy and everyday struggles set in? What happens when that performance has to translate into tangible results? What happens when the people leave and they have their lives and there's not a stage there? People need leadership that provides assistance and not just pyrotechnic entrances with catchy music. Offering yourself up as a hero is very, very potent politics, but governing requires more than just playing a part. It demands tackling complex issues, making difficult choices, and that's far less glamorous than commanding a stage, but essential. And while rallies can build fervor, it's the hard work of governance that builds the trust and addresses the real world needs of the people you serve and not just the fans in the seats. I don't have this in the speech, but I want to mention this because this is when I'm thinking about this section. This is where I really think about MAGA. And I'm curious is because we look at like FDR did a lot of this with the New Deal coalition, and that dominated politics from about the 1930s to about, we can argue 68, we can even argue later into the 70s. And he used, similar things to really build this potent base. Does this have the same legs? Are we going to see a new like New Deal coalition except a MAGA? I don't think so. But it comes back to those points of, the governance aspects. I could be wrong, but I think it's really cool. I'm interested. That's one of the things I find interesting. So where does that leave us? It leaves us here at this conference and recognizing the power of the perspectives that you bring. For too long, many people in my field, political science, expected politics to fit neatly into our models. But politics evolves. And right now, American politics, especially at the executive level, is deeply influenced by the rhythms, tactics, and ethos of professional wrestling, thanks to its most prominent practitioner. This field, your work, this is not fringe. This is vital work. I think it's really important right now. You're documenting and decoding the language of the contemporary power, and that is deeply political. Every conversation in every panel today, I think, does hold real significance. My focus is the political landscape, but I've come to appreciate just how dynamic and influential the world of professional wrestling truly is. It's not isolated, and it weaves through so many aspects of our lives and culture. It's a striking reality, isn't it? I mean, that communication style, public persona of the recent political leadership that's significantly been shaped in this arena. And the lessons learned are about audience engagement, narrative, performance, and they've had a profound influence and impact on our national dialogue. When we explore wrestling, we're looking at more than just analyzing a unique discipline. We're gaining some crucial tools to better understand the forces at play in our society, the art of communication, better or worse, and more importantly, we gain a clearer reflection of ourselves. And that journey is incredibly valuable. The lesson here is not about Trump. It's about us. It's about how we study politics. It's about how we teach, how we talk, how we engage with the institutions that shape our world. If we keep pretending that politics is only something that happens on C-SPAN, we're going to miss what's happening on Twitter, on Truth Social, in memes, and arenas throughout this country. We cannot afford to dismiss pop culture anymore, not as fluff, not as distraction. Because as this community knows, that fluff is where people form worldviews. It's where they find their heroes, and yeah, it's where they find their villains. Like it or not, our current president is shaped more by pulp culture than PBS. His playbook feels less shaped by the Brookings papers and more by the bright lights of popular culture, reality TV, tabloid headlines, and of course, wrestling. And here's the wake-up call. If we dismiss these cultural influences, the reality TV cadence, social media savvy, the understanding of spectacle, and we say, oh, well, that's just not serious politics, we risk fundamentally misunderstanding powerful political forces. Because the people who respond to those styles, they live in the cultural landscape. They have streaming subscriptions, they follow online trends, they engage with entertainment. Ignoring pop culture isn't just snobbery, this is strategic blindness. And it's blindness by the parties, it's blindness by the politicians, because it doesn't fit conveniently into what they do. So ignoring that, looking down on that, it's a mistake. Dismissing the cultural forces that shape our leaders because they come from entertainment, that's how academics get left behind, scratching our heads, wondering why things have passed us by. One of the biggest challenges we have in American politics today isn't division, in my opinion, it's disconnection. When political parties and their leaders stop trying to understand voters, it becomes easier to dismiss them than engage with them. Let me be clear. This is not a jab at one side or another. There's plenty of blame to go around. It's like politics has become a sport with fans, not citizens. People rally behind their team, not for shared values or better policies, but for the win. And when that team loses, the response isn't curiosity or self-reflection, it's attack mode. There's no effort to understand why the other side resonated with people. There's just blame, mockery, and more noise. That kind of thinking does not bring people together. It pushes the middle away, and not necessarily to the other side, but just out. And they leave out of sheer frustration. And here's one of the problems. Too many voices in politics today care more about deepening divides than finding common ground. Or worse, they think compromise means full surrender from everybody else. And in some corners, there's outright dismissal of any viewpoint that doesn't perfectly align with their own. We can't just keep building walls and calling that leadership. We need more bridges, and that starts with listening, not with labeling. And y'all, and this is why I think this conference is important. Y'all see the connections. You understand the performance. You're the ones equipped to understand these dynamics and to bridge the gap between culture and politics and offer crucial insights to where we are, where we might be going, and who we are. So let me close by saying this. I've come here to talk about Donald Trump and professional wrestling, but I want to leave reminding you that you're the ones watching the show when others just think it's background noise. And more than that, you're teaching the rest of us how to understand the spectacle. And that's not just entertainment. That's important. Your work isn't just about wrestling. It's about understanding the potent, sometimes strange, and undeniably powerful ways performance shapes reality. So keep digging, keep playing with these ideas, keep analyzing, keep sharing insight, because I think right now it's more important than ever. And thank you. Thank you for letting me speak here.
I mean, if Zoom could do a "this is awesome," I
Thank you.
think that's going on in the chat right now. And I'm like frantically trying to write every word you say. And I'm just like, damn, what did she say? Potent or podcast? That's awesome. This was awesome. Oh, you're on mute now. What happened?
I have a copy if you'd like me to send it to you. That's why I had to look behind it, because I can't do 30 minutes out of my head. I'm not that smart.
And yes, it is recorded. So that was fantastic. So many snaps and claps, and yeah, we got to keep fighting forever. And damn, almost leaving me speechless because I have so many things I know I want to ask, but I'll give it up to the audience first. Like, if does anybody have a question or comment that they would like to say after that? Because I mean, I feel inspired as hell, and I don't know what to do, but I'll do something. Is there a question or comment from anybody in the audience? Yeah, Melina, am I saying it right?
Yes, you are. Hello, everybody. Hello, actually from Germany, looking into US politics. So thank you for your great and inspirational talk. I think we all really, applaud you. I have an idea I wanted to share concerning one kind of small idea in your talk about how Trump supporters are kind of like smart marks, and that they actually know the rule of the performance of Donald Trump. And what I wanted to add there was that this knowledgeability to these rules is actually also something where Trump can hide behind and a veneer for him, because of course he kind of, or in an ironical way, because everyone knows he plays such a character, he can actually say exactly what he wants to do and exactly what his opinion is, but people just don't take it seriously and are still surprised when he does exactly what he said that he would do, which is also something, again, I think is connected to wrestling, which as a form kind of always plays on, sometimes plays on this doubtful connection or relationship to reality, and this idea, is this play? What is going on exactly here? So again, another interesting connection.
I can tell you what I think. Donald Trump has no sense of humor. As somebody who has watched him for a while, the man has no sense of humor. And when he says he's joking, it's because he's backtracking. And so when he says things, really what he's doing is he's throwing it on the wall, kind of like spaghetti, to see if it sticks. And like, it was kind of what you were saying, it's like when he's saying things and people go, oh, you can't take him seriously. No. You have to listen to him literally. The man means usually every word he says, because there is no filter between here and there with Donald Trump. The idea happens here and it pops out there. And when that happens, and you'll see him, and somebody who's actually, it's my job to watch him. at times, you'll see him build ideas. I mean, he's serious about a third run. He's not joking. And he said, "Oh no, we're exploring." No, he's absolutely serious. And all he's doing is he's trying to, there's also, and I get into this actually in the book a little bit, there's also the psychology thing of where you say something enough times, people forget where they heard it from, but it provides validity of the fact that they kind of have a half remembered idea of it. And that's also what he's doing, is he's building that up by going, "Oh yeah, I heard that from somebody sometime. Yeah, that's true." But that's why he's doing a lot of that too. Yeah, but he's, I think he's exactly what you're saying. I agree.
And Adam, I think you had your hand up, and then Lily.
Thanks, Tanisha. I really enjoyed the presentation. I thought it was very incisive indeed. And I find the parallels drawn between Trump and wrestling persuasive. I just wondered what we should make of the fact that when Trump was involved in WWE, he didn't really show very much aptitude for wrestling performance. You could kind of see him being like led through his performances a little by Vince McMahon, among others at the time. But also the fact that WWE's fan base sometimes at least seems to lean anti-Trump. I'm thinking of the recent instance where the fans booed Hulk Hogan after his RNC appearance, for instance. And certainly more so than the MMA fan base, which has really embraced Trump. I don't think Trump has appeared on WWE since becoming a political figure, possibly for fear of being publicly booed, but he regularly appears at UFC events and always to great fanfare. So I wonder, might Trump's performance style be closer to an MMA fighter than a wrestler? And do you think the difference is meaningful?
I think it is. I think the reason why he's backed off is exactly what you said, is because he's being booed. He can't handle criticism. He never has been able to handle criticism. And I don't think I mean, he's not an actor. The man's not, he can't act to save his life. I put it in the book, one of my favorite, craziest stories, which I ran across in somebody else's book and I cited it, was apparently, he'd been involved in wrestling for about 15 years at that point. And it's the storyline where Vince McMahon's limo blew up. He called the offices the next day.
Oh yeah, he thought it was
see if
real.
he was okay. Yeah. Seriously, I mean, it wasn't like yeah, we kind of realize, yeah, I think even the average person realized that wasn't real.
Katie
I
Vick.
I think my hunch with like the MMA and the UFC stuff going on right now, because I actually thought about putting that in the speech. I really did look at it, and ultimately I decided to leave it out. And part of that is because I think it's emerging, and I don't know a lot to say about it. I think because what I would say is it makes me uncomfortable because of what I would draw comparisons to, because it's more brutal, it's bloody, and it's unpredictable at times, more so than like wrestling is, because wrestling's more scripted. I don't know what to do with the more brutal and the more brutal aspects of it right now. To be honest, in terms of like how to tell a narrative on it. I think he likes it for the fan base. I think he's going because of the fan base, and because he's always loved. I think, and I didn't have time. I think I'd have to do a deeper dive into Trump's love of boxing. Because Trump has been a huge boxing fan, and I think there's a parallel between the MMA UFC stuff that he likes and his historical love of boxing, maybe tied up with the blood sport aspects of it,
Yeah.
is what I think's going on more so.
Yeah, I'm looking up an article. I don't think he's here because I told him late, but Kyle Green is a professor up at Brockport. We co-wrote a paper dissecting the brand, the media narratives that the UFC was putting out during COVID, and looking at 3 different promotional videos, and one of them was Trump, a promotional speech outside the White House that he was giving because the UFC was, the first back to do live events, because they did it in Florida. It was very regulated, like where they could do it. It was making all the sense. Like, oh yeah, well, they just go to whoever they're in bed with. And The MMA overlap with them, it's insane. And that I studied MMA a lot more now than I have pro wrestling, but it's becoming one and the same. The merger, the TKO, it's all so much now embedded. And so I'm curious to see if we can start seeing him maybe go back into pro wrestling once this continues to strengthen that bond, you know?
Yeah, I was reading articles. I really did think about adding this in, and I was reading articles on how each one is adding legitimacy to the
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
And they're wrestling and like the MMA style fighting. There's it's a two-sided arrow where they're each taking something from the other, and they're both getting something out of it. And we're going to see it increasingly kind of merging.
Totally.
And I don't know enough about it, and I didn't want to tackle something that I don't feel comfortable about.
No, for sure. For sure. Definitely can spark more. Lily, want to make sure there's tons more comments too.
Well, first of all, thank you. And that was a great presentation. I did have a question, but I have like ADD or something, and I forgot half of it. But I was thinking through. I don't know if you ever read, there were a philosopher named Roland Barthes' essay on wrestling.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's featured heavily in my book. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
I'm very
actually,
familiar.
okay. Well, what was the name of your book again? I have to write this one down.
Donald Trump and the Kayfabe Presidency.
Oh, okay. Um, uh, I'm sorry, I got distracted there for a second, but I was okay, I was just wondering, like, I had a question about like Donald Trump's character and what he's like, if he's putting on a character per se, and what that like what he's trying to signify with his persona. I'm sorry.
No, no, no. Your question's fine. The deep breath was for, oh, how long do I want to talk? I think he is putting on a character. Where I try to start with Donald Trump when I'm thinking about this stuff, it's, he has siblings, and he was the only one his parents shipped off to military school. Do you know how big of a hole probably is burned into you as a kid when you're the one your parents say they can't handle and they ship you away? And I think he has spent a lifetime trying to prove to his father that he's good enough. His father told him to stay in Queens and don't get into Manhattan real estate. And he got into Manhattan real estate to prove his father wrong that he could do it. And I think since then, he has constantly he's played this character of somebody who is more successful and better. I mean, I remember watching when I was a kid, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and looking at like his gold-plated Manhattan apartments and being like, who wants to live like this? I'd have to wear sunglasses inside. But he's been playing a character so long, and this is where I was thinking is I'm not quite sure anymore where the person and the character begin and end. And I sometimes wonder if that's because he might be so damaged from actually a lot of those childhood influences of that. Because if you read from people who were at school with him and military school with him, he would constantly put on a persona there as well about how the type of person, and people knew he was like how many women he was dating when he was like 13. We know that's not true, but he's constantly always projected this from a very early age of being bigger and better than anybody else. And it served him well. It has gotten him to the White House. So that is, hey, that works. But one of the things that I worry about, and I didn't want to dive too deep into this, is at least for me, I think the interesting tropes within wrestling, which I don't think is an MMA, which is the tabula rasa, is the fact that you can blank slate people and you can blank slate characters and you can completely forget all that stuff conveniently ever happened. Whereas in MMA, that stuff's very real, and you can't, it's, the records they put a lot of veracity on the record keeping and things like this. And that's one of the things I think is interesting, and a
Mhm.
change to see if that's anything's going to happen there in that
Yeah.
space. But where I'm trying to go with that is he lives in a world, and if you watch him as president, he loves the tabula rasa things. Oh, I never said that. He absolutely did. Oh, that is that, that thing's it's not a problem. World politics doesn't play that way.
Mm.
I mean, one of the things I'm really worried about, especially, are the Chinese. I mean, the Chinese have done bureaucracy 1,000 years longer than we have. They know how to do it and do it well. And messing with bureaucratic structures with a country that has like has 5 times more experience than we've been around as a country, I think, is playing with dynamite. That's why I was mentioning some of that, and I was trying to obliquely reference it in the talk. Is there's long histories there, and then you could deep dive into like the sociology of high communication styles and low communication styles. And the United States typically uses low communication style, which is kind of much more this direct style. He's messing with countries that use high communication styles, which is really based upon like ritual and stuff. And that stuff has memories, and long memories, and really long memories.
No clean slate.
And that's what worries me about like this stuff. And it kind of gets around to your point. I know I'm bouncing around, but that's the stuff that worries me.
Yeah, and you know what? I was just thinking about maybe it was this last week or so. There was that journalist Douglas Murray was on Joe Rogan, and it became this big thing because he was challenging them for God's sake, everything. But they especially slamming him because they're trying to eliminate expertise. Like, oh, the expertise is stupid. That's just woke. That's just no. And he gave this analogy of like, if I gave an MMA opinion, you would slam me because I would get it wrong. Why can't we do that to you in this, in politics? And you having a guy come up here and say Hitler wasn't that bad. I mean, and so this, for me, it's like, I think we're in this cultural paradigm shift where the truth doesn't matter anymore. The value of truth is diminished. It's totally gone. And it's all about stories and messages, and from that lived perspective, which if it's coming from a dominant ideology or dominant narrative, then guess what? If you're on the margins, then good luck, fucker. And it's like that paradigm shift, it's so striking of like, you could almost put a pin in the timeline of like when these certain things kind of happened, right? And it was like 2016, and it's just crazy like how this, because it wasn't a flip of a switch, right? It's almost what, 9-10 years, and we've gotten here. How much longer is it going to take to try and bring truth back, right? Like when facts actually matter, like when can we say that, okay, it doesn't matter stories and messages and narrative persuasion, cool, I can do that all day, but what about this democracy, like truth? How are we, if expertise doesn't matter anymore, none of us scholars are going to have jobs, because then they're just going to let YouTube guy into Howard and teach at Stanford, and then you don't have to go to a university. You can just go to the Joe Rogan University of the Manosphere Institute or some shit.
I wanted to mention we did have a really good question in the chat.
Oh yeah, please,
I
thanks.
saw
Tate, do you see that, Shannon, or you want me to read
Yeah, I
it to
saw
you?
the
Wrestling
Tate question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I was lately. Sorry. No, it's okay. Yeah, I saw that's no problem. Wrestling figures. No, I saw. No, it's like they put another comment in. I was like, that's cool.
Sorry about that. Hi, how we doing? I'm a little sick. I didn't want to cough my way through it, but just basically, great lecture. I wanted to know if you have any comment on wrestlers and wrestling figures that have already entered politics. Like Inoki was twice a senator in Japan, famously. Kane is on his way up in conservative politics. Linda McMahon's twice in the U.S. cabinet. Jesse Ventura. Is there anyone on the current landscape who Rick Steiner is in a on a school board in Georgia that's very influential.
Really?
Yeah, I know, shocking to all five senses.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there are many more. Matt Morgan, who's not a prominent figure, he became mayor of a town. But the question is there any current figures, you just as an opinion or something like you see going forward? Is there any current pro wrestling figures who you see moving into that direction? And also, the majority, not all, but the majority of the folks from pro wrestling who have entered politics have aligned with American political conservatism. And do you think there's a that's a causal or corollary relationship towards that? Anyway, thanks. Great lecture.
Oh, thank you. Anybody currently in I don't think he's interested.
I just put out The Rock. I was like,
he's throwing it around.
mm-hmm.
I think the one who's actually most capable, but I don't think he's interested, is John Cena.
Yeah.
I don't think he's interested. I mean, everything that you see him signaling is he wants to make the sweet, sweet Hollywood money. But I think he has the potential if he chose to do that. Because he's, I think, at least one of the ones I see that really who actually could care. One of the problems I often see with a lot of wrestlers, at least in my opinion, and you can see, and I'll talk about some of these here, they have problems carrying long speech. They're I don't think they're real good on the carrying a thematic long speech through, and they often, and even Trump does it, they resort to like the quick jabs and things like this because it's much more of a natural style, I think, rather than the long sustained. I think he actually could. I think he's got the personality that he could pull off long speech pretty well if he chose to go that way. Rock, yeah. The Rock, I think they've thrown around, and I think he's backed off. I don't know why he's backed off, but they were throwing him around pretty seriously, and then he and then I don't know. He chose not to. The other ones, when you're talking about when you're asking about some of the previous ones, I think one of the differences, and I think that you're seeing between some of these that you're listed, like particularly Jesse Ventura is the ones popping in Noki's too, is they played serious. I mean, they got elected by populations, especially Jesse Ventura, that were expecting the wrestler, and instead they got the politician. And on top of that, Minnesota's got some quirkiness to it that really hurt Ventura. And the quirkiness is that they do allow same-day registration for voting. And so Ventura won off of same-day registration. If you look at the numbers, that's how he won. But then the problem was then he had to govern from a party with both parties unhappy with him in his state legislature. And both of his parties his own party wasn't happy with him in the state legislature. And so that made it real tough. I think that's why you saw him stall out. And I think that's also why you haven't seen like Donald Trump or anybody take swings at lower level politics sometimes at that type of level. Linda McMahon tried to run for Senate. It wasn't that successful. I mean, she's in an appointed position, essentially, at this point. That's a favor.
Yeah.
That job's a favor for loyalty, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, and you just have to look back at when she was doing the Senate run.
Shoot.
He gave a speech at Sacred Heart, which is where she was on board of trustees. That was the only speech. He went into Connecticut. Trump went into Connecticut, which is as blue as blueberries, and the RNC was freaking out in 2015 because he went in and gave that speech because it's a waste of money, but he did it as a favor. He did it as a favor to her. And there's a lot of loyalty there. I don't know. I mean, going conservative, I got a lot of problems with the Democratic Party. I mean, I got problems with both parties. I kind of sit in the middle, to be honest, to be perfectly honest.
Mhm.
One of my problems with the Democratic Party, for example, is I don't make any bones about my age. I'm 52. Okay. Joe Biden has been in politics as long as I've been alive. He was elected the same year I was born.
Mm.
And a lot of the people who were the old guard when I was graduating high school in the early 90s were still, as of a couple years ago, the old guard still in the Democratic Party. They've been really poor at integrating a lot of young blood and building building a team underneath them. And the Republicans, like it or not, have been actually pretty good at that. They've been pretty good at allowing other voices in, and partially because of some, other issues, but I think that's why a lot of like people who are outsiders have gone to the Republican side, not always with politics, but it's a path forward because for a lot of people on the Democratic side, they were locked out. You can just look at politicians. I mean, you can look at several young politicians, they get locked out of that net of the old guard of the Democratic Party. And I think that's really given them opportunity. I think the Republican Party gave them more opportunities to get through.
That's very interesting.
And there's some structural reasons for it as well. Structurally, the Democrats are organized like a unitary system, meaning they're nationally organized, whereas the Republicans are more like a confederacy, so they have like the different states. So you can actually get a little more porous at the state level with the Republicans. And then once you get some momentum, you can use that to kind of leverage into other states or leverage into the national system. Whereas since the Democrats are nationally organized, you basically got to hit the big show initially. You can't work the basically the independent circuits, if you want to think of it that way in a wrestling metaphor.